Singapore has come a long way from the anti-national service riots in 1954 to the most recent Pink Dot, which influenced the repeal of Section 377A in 2022. Both events have occurred decades apart, but one common similarity is that these groups of people are dissatisfied and are seeking for change. There are always changes and improvements which can be made to our society. An area which is definitely important for us to look into would be the living conditions of the migrant workers in Singapore, which is still an issue that persists till the day. In the 1970s, Singapore had to import large numbers of immigrant workers to fill labour shortages. Over the years, social movements that support the equality of migrant workers were formed. Social movements, NGOs, and policies may have been established for years, but fighting for better treatment of migrant workers is an ongoing battle. A most recent example would be from the COVID-19 pandemic. On March 23rd, 2020, TWC2 wrote to a local media to caution the government that the poor living conditions of 12 to 20 people packed into a poorly ventilated room and that hundreds of men on each floor sharing communal toilets and showering facilities may facilitate the spread of the virus. Unfortunately, TWC2 was proven right and the number of foreign workers contracting COVID-19 surged immensely in a short period of time. To manage the situation, some solutions introduced by the Joint Task Force are as follows. Dormitories were under lockdown and COVID-positive workers were moved to community facilities to undergo quarantine and treatment. In June, solutions moving forward were reviewed and by August, they stood down and operations were handed over to Assurance Care and Engagement Group. It took over 4 months before all dormitories were pronounced clear of the virus and that 9 in 10 workers in the construction, maritime and process sectors could return back to their jobs. After a year-long review post-pandemic, the new dormitory standards based on feedback and experience during COVID-19 were finalized. This means that the risk of similar outbreaks in dorm will be reduced and will at the same time improve the living conditions of the migrant workers. On September 2022, MOM announced that the Foreign Employees Dormitories Act will be expanded to include dormitories with 7 or more beds. This meant that 16,000 dormitories will be regulated under this act instead of 53 previously. A set of essential living requirements will be applied to all dormitories, and larger dormitories will be subjected to more stringent requirements on dormitory management, resident welfare and safety, and health. To improve housing standards, living conditions, and better manage future disease outbreaks for existing dormitories, the Dormitory Transition Scheme was introduced as the new dormitory standards only applies to new dormitories. The COVID-19 pandemic made me wonder, if the government was to heed the caution given by TWC2, would the outbreak of the pandemic in the dormitories be less severe than it was? Why was the caution not heeded? Was the government not listening? Despite the solutions mentioned, reports of overcrowding in dormitories and poor living conditions still exist due to issues such as increasing rents of dormitories and influx of migrant workers into Singapore after the pandemic. More can definitely be done to improve the welfare and rights of the foreign workers working and living in Singapore. Migrant workers too have loved ones that care for them. Preserving their dignity is the least that we can do.